This video presents a complete philosophical, religious and scientific theory of the world, a unified theory. I have this knowledge in me. It has unfolded gradually since childhood in the 1960s, when I experienced the trauma that effectively put me outside of many social processes and gave me a deviant outlook on the world. It was tough for many years. Then, from 2018 onwards, I experienced what is called a spiritual awakening, and at one point the complete understanding was suddenly there. I can't explain how. The knowledge explains the fundamental nature and the detailed workings of the world. These are big words, I know. And there is no way I can make you believe me, other than explaining the knowledge itself. The proof is in the pudding. And who am I, you ask? I am both an analytical, technically oriented, scientifically minded person, a computer programmer, a trained broadcasting engineer and a journalist, but simultaneously also a highly intuitive and sensitive guy with a great sense of connection with, that which we are, what the world is, with creation itself. In this video, I shall try to give you a brief overview of the insights. It's a complete theory about the world, and I've already presented it in a book entitled The Experiencer, published in 2022. See my website at tomottmar.com. Okay, so let's start. First, I must introduce you to a magical formula, one of the simplest, namely 1 + 1. The answer is obviously 2, you say. You are right, of course, but that is not a complete answer. There is more to it. 1 + 1 actually equals 3, in a philosophical, logical sense. Say that you have two of, anything, for example, people. What are the two people when you consider them together? Are they neighbors, relatives, friends, partners, lovers? The answer might be that they are none of that. They are unrelated. But still, unrelated, quote unquote, is also something. A notion, an understanding, knowledge. The two elements need not be identical or even of the same kind. Apples and pears, considered together, constitute fruit. My point is that whenever two or more things come together, they form something new, something third. The combination of the elements included. 1 + 1 equals 3. And note the following. When these new combinations emerge, these too must be assessed in combination with everything else in the vicinity. So another new combination emerges, yet another, and so on. Emergence inevitably leads to more emergence. The next thing I claim is that the world is idealistic. What does that mean? Well, you are conscious and aware, right? I say that the consciousness and awareness you possess are all that exists. It's a fragment of a global awareness in a universal spirit, which many will call God. I call it the experiencer, to use a neutral word. The whole world, you and your life included, is a highly complex construct of notions within the mind of that single spirit. That philosophical idea is nothing new. Most religions and ancient cultures share that belief. Only in the Western culture since the Enlightenment, or the Great Age of Reason in the 18th century and onwards, Have we left the idealistic philosophical position and now believe that the world is made of material stuff, quote unquote? But for over 100 years we have known it is incorrect. Science now instead talks of a quantum field. That is the origin of everything. And the field is nothing physical, as far as we know. It's more of a mental phenomenon. All it takes to understand the universe is to accept the following. The only thing in existence is a sentient spirit. I call it the experiencer. And I have a picture of it. Do you want to see? Are you ready? Okay, here it comes.
Okay.
You're right. The picture shows nothing. The spirit is a void. The spirit is pure awareness, isness, vigilance, alertness, with no content. The experiencer is an eternal state of awareness waiting for something to happen. Any change will do. The experiencer is just like you. Even if nothing happens, you get ideas in your mind. So nothing is going on until out of the void emerges a tiny, mad idea. That is how the world began, according to the channeled book A Course in Miracles from the 1970s. And here it is, the tiniest of ideas. Watch carefully. It's a dot, a point, whatever you want to call it. And what is the next idea? Another dot, of course. It is all the experiencer knows so far. Now emergence starts happening. What are the two dots when they are seen together? The new thing, the three, is the something between the two dots. What is this something between the dots? What ID do we assign to it? Distance. And the next ID? A third dot, of course, this time in the newly conceived distance from an existing one. Space is forming. IDs are not restricted by any limits. They are everywhere and present forever, or until new IDs overwrite them, which doesn't happen at this scale. So, in that single instant, suddenly there are dots and distances all over. Can you see what now also happened? All sorts of distances have emerged. We need a new ID to understand the deviant distances. What concept can affect the dots so that they are spread away from each other to a variable degree? It must be something that itself is variable. The more you apply of it, the bigger the distances become. You know the answer. Time. The more time, the greater the distance. We now have an abstract pattern in the mind of a spirit, the experiencer. It was created in zero time because the experiencer knows no limitations whatsoever. The pattern is everywhere and outside time, but still contains information about all time and space. This is the zero-point field, the quantum field. Everything originates from the geometry of this field. These two concentrations look like they might be the first building blocks for the building blocks for the building blocks for the quarks. At this scale, everything is very small. We are at the Planck length, 10 to the power of minus 35 meters. A quark is many, many, many times bigger. So it is a long chain of emergence ahead. Things combine mentally as ideas to form new concepts. That's how emergence goes. When we finally arrive at the quark, the next steps are protons and electrons, hydrogen, water, and so on. And as we have seen, now the way onwards to the material world we think is there is straight and understood, driven by idealistic emergence. And also, distance over time equals motion. So hectic vibrations were also there, right from the beginning. These were some glimpses into the story of creation. What I have shown you is how the mind works. Even philosophers who firmly believe in a material world agree. The philosopher Daniel Dennett, for example, have presented the multiple drafts model of consciousness, which states the same. Ideas lead to new ideas through emergence. Dennett and I only disagree about what comes first, matter or mind. The correct answer is mind, in my opinion. What I say then is the following. 1. There exists a spirit that is aware, or more precisely, is able to register all changes, all things new that arise through the ever-ongoing emergence. It all happens in the mind of that spirit, and consequently I call the theory idealistic emergence. 2. It all started with a tiny impulse, the weakest and smallest possible, like a barely noticeable breath. The inevitable result was the instant construction of an extremely complex and unlimited mental pattern in the mind of the universal spirit, or God, or the experiencer, or whatever you want to call it. The spirit's mind is unlimited by time and space. So the complete construct came into existence in zero time and was everywhere, quote unquote. Just like everything in your own mind is unbound by time and space. 3. All parts of the pattern must be understood as something and must be interpreted. That follows from the law of idealistic emergence. Everything new, the 3, must be understood. If not, the process of being aware and registering changes comes to a halt and nothing more happens. The interpretations of the pattern are the world, quote unquote. Or rather, our notions and thoughts about a world. These notions and thoughts must also be fully experienced. That's what the spirit, the experiencer, is doing. It's experiencing. That part is probably the hardest to grasp, but let me say for now that every single notion must also be experienced as what we call qualia. That is light, colors, smells, tastes, sensory impressions, materiality, and even thoughts. They are all types of qualia. Okay, I assume that you're about to fall off at this point, or at least that you are full of questions and maybe also skepticism. So, let me try to explain it all by use of an allegory. Imagine you are at an amusement park. It is all in the mind of the universal spirit. There are many attractions: restaurants, merry-go-rounds, carousels, roller coasters, ice cream bars, ponds with colorful boats, and so on. It's all there. You can see everything, and much activity is happening. but you are not participating yet. You have the map with all the information about everything available, but you still do not know what it feels like to experience all the attractions and services. They are abstract potentials, clearly defined, clearly understood, constructed by some superior intelligence, but not yet experienced. So, you select one of the roller coasters. It's a heck of a ride that lasts a couple of minutes. It requires your full attention. You dissociate into the experience and forget everything about your past and everything else. That is exactly what happens when you are born as a human being. When you are done with the ride, you are so shaken and stirred, both, that you promise not to do it again until you are better prepared. You now need to experience something else that might help you cope, realign, prepare for more and experience more. That is what we call karma. Like a curious child, which is your true self before society's conditioning sets in, you want to try it all. If you can fully enjoy all these attractions, it will be so much fun, and you will learn so much about yourself. The potential is vast, and it gives you joy, which is the ultimate goal in life. Let me add that you have already been 1,000 times to the park. You have tried almost everything and have developed into one of the park's most experienced visitors. You are highly developed, or what we call an old soul. When you finally have achieved mastery of the wild rides and everything else, you are done. You now know what everything feels like. You have gone entirely into experiencing every single attraction. Each ride and service is one of your dissociations into being one particular human or something else. The one universal spirit that I call the experiencer created all amusement parks and all attractions in a split second as abstractions, conceptions in its mind. It must have happened instantly, since everything abstract is unbound by time, space, and all we perceive as physicalistic. All these things we experience as real are, well, experiences that we call qualia. The abstractions, the ideas that precede these experiences, are the actual reality, since the world is all inside the mind of a spirit. Plato was right. Like the child version of you, the experiencer wants to test, taste, smell, hear, touch, and feel every single bit of it. It needs to know itself in full with all possible qualia. The spirit needs to know its creations. Have to, must. Because not knowing is fear-inducing, leading to crazy ideas that cannot sustain themselves. Not knowing also means that the chain of idealistic emergence abruptly stops, which is impossible. The abstract notions in the experiencer's mind must be examined. This eagerness, lust, need, craving, curiosity, longing, creativity, playfulness, interest, focus is in everything alive. It is life. That is what life is. It is the need to understand everything that arises through idealistic emergence. It's an inevitable, integrated part of the mechanism, the core of it. And behind it all is the highly intense necessity to restore the oneness, the peace that was disturbed in that flash of abstract chaos when the pattern emerged instantly in God's mind. What I have named the pattern is what science calls the quantum field, or simply the fabric of space-time. It arose in one single instant from a state of pure awareness, pure isness, and pure nothingness. It was a disturbance from a peaceful, conflict-free void. It feels extremely good to be in that state, Guru's report. I've experienced it partly myself. The experiencer / God / the universal spirit has an innate need to bring everything back to this state, to make it whole again. That need to rejoin it all is what we call love. It's a craving for oneness. It feels like an intense need to escape the fear of the unknown. It is the recul or contraction of the extreme expansion and fragmentation that occurred in that instant the world came to be as an abstraction. We seek peace and bliss, absence from fear. When you dissociate or go for a crazy roller coaster ride, you forget your true reality and are caught in experiencing some small part of the park, an attraction, or a lifetime. It is so intense and credible that you go entirely into the thing, believing you are the thing. And while being that thing, a human being on a ride, your ego is doing the job. You are a fragment of the universal spirit having an experience, and your ego functions identically as God naturally. It happens like this. You are in the abstract domain and need to learn what everything in the park, quote unquote, is. It's all about expanding your knowledge, adding qualia knowledge to the already complete abstract knowledge. It is the universe experiencing itself. So, you discern all the abstract offers in the park. You have all detailed information, but you need to enter the attraction to experience it fully and get your learning. You select one of the life experiences on offer. You focus on this zygote, which is the first combined cell of a human being, and start experiencing being the zygote. You go into flow, just like you can get lost in a painting, a piece of music, some delicious dish, or the smell of roses. When you focus, everything else disappears from your awareness. You focus so intensely that suddenly you slip into the thing, being the thing. You are now a materialized baby. The experience of materiality are the qualia associated with the idea in your soul and mind of being a baby. It's just like when you hear music. Technically, they are waves of molecules constituting the air around you, but you experience the waves as sound. Sound is the qualia. Qualia are the experience of the ideas in your mind. In the life you have just started, you get it all simultaneously. No wonder it keeps you occupied. The cells divide and divide again and develop into a newborn baby. The birth is so traumatizing that almost all remembrance of your actual peaceful state is lost. What goes on inside and outside you while being this thing occupies your full attention. You experience lots of action and also growth and development as that thing, a baby. So far, you are in the wonderful world of a child. From your perspective of being the child, you still believe that you are what you always were, a part of God. You have no idea about being something else. So, you act naturally, like nature behaves, like animals. They mostly do what they do according to the knowledge and dynamics in the abstract domain. Small children are God materialized. Animals too, as long as they don't dissociate. And plants, trees, lakes, rivers, mountains, stars, bugs, and whatever, they are all experiencing themselves as parts of God. They and we are all God's sensory organs, for God to experience itself, in a sense. Then, at the age of around 3, something happens. We discover ourselves. It happens with humans and probably to a lesser degree with other animals. There is a mirror test for that. Does the animal understand that it sees itself in the mirror? You learn that these things around you are separate from yourself. An arm, a leg, a toy, the cat, your mama, a glass of milk, and the other kids in the kindergarten. You suddenly realize that you are something in your own right. You dissociate. You become self-aware, self-conscious. You acquire knowledge about yourself as a self. Consequently, the right thing to do is to grab a fig leaf. You start thinking thoughts that include the awareness of yourself. Not just everything around you, but you and everything else around you. You suddenly are in the center of countless relationships. As with everything else, these relationships must be understood and experienced. And to do that, you must understand what this new, strange I is, that is having the relationships. The universal spirit can't help you at this level because the I that suddenly appeared is the exact same I that the spirit knows only as an abstraction, but has no actual knowledge about as an experience. It is your task to know thyself, experience the newfound I, and make the knowledge that comes from it available globally. You now have this ego, the I, that initially has no idea what it is. You also have your true self, the conscious identity developed through countless incarnations, the sum of all previous experiences. This true self wanted to experience, learn, and grow more, become more whole, more complete in its knowledge of itself. But when you went fully into the zygote, your focus became locked on the new human being growing into existence. You lost awareness of the other side where you reside. And as you discovered the I and dissociated into it, identified with it as you do with your roles in daily life, the veil came down for real. From that point onwards, it's all about relationships between everything external and this strange, newly discovered ego, of which you have no knowledge except for glimpses of remembrance and occasional hunches, what we call intuitions. You focus on yourself and the others. It's all about that now. You socialize, mingle and match, and participate in group endeavors. All is about dealing with these relationships. You adhere to norms and expectations. You become a lesser version of yourself. And when your mind is not occupied with understanding and experiencing all around you, it is fully populated with understanding and experiencing your ego. And your ego is blind, as said. It doesn't remember who it is, but it has discovered itself, nevertheless. All it now has available to know itself is the knowledge coming from social conditioning. At the same time, it still possesses the creative powers of the universal experiencer. You may call it God, if you must, because it is spirit, and spirit is all. A blind ego. countless fluctuating relationships, extreme conditioning, and a wildly creative mind. There you have the situation we are all in, our lives. No wonder we bring our children to school. That's the only way to tame them. Our whole society is created to control the unstoppable creativity. That is our true nature. Most people grasp very little of what is going on and what and who they are. Then we are a few who never started our lives like that. We discovered ourselves as egos at age 3, all right, but the relationships were not what they should have been. Our parents and surroundings were not able to create a safe space for constructive relationships to develop. They never taught, never assured us, were inconsistent, induced uncertainty, fear, a lack of trust, irrational or harmful actions, etc. Most of us can cope with a lot of that, but there is a limit to everything in this earthly life. Personally, I walked away from many of the dysfunctional relationships and focused more on the other party in the interactions, myself and my mysterious ego. It was like that from day one, assumably. That's when you discover yourself for real, awaken in a sense. I shall not go deeper into that now, but that's the reason why I can present you with all these insights into how it works. I have experienced life consciously from the perspective of an ego that soon discovered there was something even behind the ego. Without functional external relationships, an inner relationship developed between the ego and the true self, the conscious entity experiencing the ego. I always knew. I never forgot. So, where were we? Let's say you are back in the middle of the park again after some thousands or more reincarnations, ready for a new one. You are in the collective, mental, universal domain. It contains knowledge from 3 sources. 1. The original abstract interpretations, or the architect's plan for the park, if you like, which were created instantly by the experiencer when the abstract pattern exploded into existence. 2. Plus the knowledge coming from the experiencing of qualia, that is, the sensations and feelings during the reincarnations, or rides if you like. And 3. Plus the additions created by the individual dissociated egos, the visitor's thoughts and self-created experiences during the rides. Some get scared, others not. As the experience of the abstract pattern proceeds, it is gradually transformed into a joint collective mix of abstractions and qualia. It is like a puzzle coming together, manifesting. The universe is not a big bang throwing out matter along a timeline. It is a sudden abstraction arising in a spirit, and then gradually being understood, known, realized, manifested, materialized, imagined as what the spirit chooses to experience it to be.
The universe is a sudden abstraction gradually being understood.
That can be found in the early Bible. I will become what I choose to become. The result is what we call consciousness, awareness of it all, abstractions, physical manifestations, and also of the dissociated ego. The universal spirit is experiencing the ego, which then in turn creates a highly private reality. That's why we say that the ego, you and I, is dreaming. And that's why we talk about awakening. Consciousness is fluid, flexible, and constantly fluctuating like water, wind, or anything organic. It is knowledge that waves back and forth, creating crests and troughs, trickle into dark voids of unexplored abstractions. If you've ever seen water in motion, you know what I mean. Nothing can prevent water or air or whatever from filling up all available gaps. It's again a direct consequence of idealistic emergence. It is what we call entropy, but reversed. When you are done with the park, there are more parks. Or maybe you want to level up to a higher and broader outlook. From there, you can see that there are many parks in the region. You realize that simply by focusing, you might instantly be transported to another galaxy where things are very different. As a tiny way top of consciousness, you are sucked into that which you focus on. The object of interest is now the faraway galaxy. You are done with the previous park, the Milky Way you have already experienced. A woman was recently interviewed on the Wisdom from North podcast and explained that during a near-death experience, she experienced once being a nebula, a gaseous entity out in the cosmos. She could feel herself spreading out over space. She was watching what was happening in the various solar systems inside her. It was just fabulous. That might have been her consciousness conjoining with other entities of consciousness in experiencing this new, unexplored nebula. The next step would probably be fragmenting into smaller densities and entering that nebula's details. You probably fly back and forth, are merged and split, rise high in turbulent intensity, or sink low into millennia of utter calmness and peace. Wherever you flow, you will have to start from scratch to understand everything local. However, you still possess all the knowledge you already have acquired in the realm where you truly belong, in the oneness of the experiencer. You are the experiencer, but you forget it when you dissociate. On the other side, in the collective domain, you are that oneness, everything at once. You know everything, but if you want to examine your knowledge, you must focus on a part of it, just as I am doing right now, presenting this text. You must go into that particular part and study it, experience it, and suddenly you dissociate into being that thing. You forget all about your true identity and thus have to remain in that lower frequency domain until there is nothing more to explore. You die. According to Paul Selig's channeled books, the term low frequency simply means low density of knowledge. That makes sense, since the abstract pattern is the highest form of knowledge, and the pattern is formed by the first and most minuscule notions of time and space, the quantized units of space and time. Nothing can be smaller than that, which means nothing can have higher frequency. There is no conflict between the theory of idealistic emergence and traditional physics. It can't be. Let me add that I had a mystical experience once back in 2021. During a deep meditation, I experienced a situation in the canteen at my workplace in the 1990s. It was very vivid and I became curious. It felt like I was going into the scene simply by means of will. I realized that gradually my surroundings were becoming even more real. The walls and everything in the large room began to wrap around me, like the sky and everything outdoors is around you. Suddenly I knew that if I didn't stop it, I would disappear entirely into the scene and continue living my life from that point on in space and time. I was experiencing the start of a reincarnation. It was very real. Had I not stopped it with my will, my current material me would probably have been found dead in the bed, while my conscious soul gave itself entirely to the life I was about to relive. On the other side of the veil, you have full access to all experiences ever had by everything, be it a living being or something dead, quote unquote. Your experiences from the previous amusement parks are also there for all to see and experience fully. The part of the abstract pattern is no longer just an abstraction, but now has materiality, smell, taste, colors, sensations, etc. The feeling of sheer fright you had on the roller coaster is now available to every soul up there, and to God as a whole, which is the same. Gradually, the pattern will be experienced, filled in like a puzzle. The individual experiences you have are all at the same time contributing to universal knowledge. A Course in Miracles explains that your experiences are converted to universal knowledge by and through the Holy Spirit. A Course in Miracles uses Christian terminology, but isn't a Christian document. It goes above all religions. In my understanding, the Holy Spirit is the global spirit branching out through the ego's confused conceptions, interpretations, and ideas. And it is also our connection back again from ego to spirit. On the ego's end, the Holy Spirit is perceived as intuition, knowledge about the pattern shining through. On the universal spirit's end, on the other hand, all the noise and rubbish coming from the ego is received through the Holy Spirit, the branch connecting us to the trunk, if you like, and merged lovingly with the collective universal knowledge, adding new knowledge through a process of complexity dynamics. The Holy Spirit is the connection to our abstract reality, the channel through which the idea of you is experienced. It is not a connection or a channel as such. That is just an image used to describe the fact that you are what you are, even though you believe to be something else than that, an ego, a you. It's more like the Holy Spirit is your inner truth, while the ego being your outer fantasy. It is a filter in one direction, and a burst of heavenly knowledge in the other. All proper systems usually have a directional filter somewhere in their construction. That's the basis for all electronics, for example. It all started 13.8 billion years ago, seen from our perspective. Back then, the first ideas of space, time, motion, particles, etc. arose. From these, the fundamental ideas of atoms, molecules, tissue, human beings, plants, mountains, oceans, planets, stars, galaxies, and everything else that has ever and will ever exist in this universe came into being as abstractions instantly. Every single object and event in the past and future was immediately there, and every thought as well. It was perceived as conceptions, ideas, knowledge. It was memorized, we would say. At the same instant, the examination of the abstract knowledge started. It's like a weave being woven from a pattern, slowly materializing. It's a multifaceted development from abstraction to a full-fledged experience with all possible qualia. It takes time, just like weaving takes time, while the pattern exists eternally as something abstract, timeless. Every soul going into that particular part of the pattern contributes with their experiences in the form of qualia. They choose different attractions at different locations and with different people joining them. But all are in the same park at the same time and thus contribute to the overall experience of the whole park at that moment. Knowledge simply is. You can go into every part of it and start examining it. That is what we call focus. You can try that right now with your own private knowledge. The first qualia we experience while focusing are what we call thoughts. Thoughts are the qualia of focusing on abstract knowledge, if we turn it around. But thoughts are only one form of qualia. Just like notions formed into ever higher emergent ideas, qualia must have developed through emergence into ever more complex experiences. They must have arisen similarly, with one qualia leading to the next, each bound to their specific notion or composite of notions. In other words, abstractions and qualia develop in perfect parallel, but totally out of sync, since time is among the 2-3 first abstract concepts and thus also among the first qualia. All subsequent qualia must then include time, have time as an integral part of the experience. That is why we experience a world inside time, while thoughts are unrestricted by time, space, and everything physical. Thoughts are the first qualia, the rest follow in time. The total experience of all qualia began immediately. But in our experience, it has taken 13.8 billion years until now. The reality is that all development until the end of the universe is already completed, but only in abstract form. We are looking back on something that is, wherever we are looking. That's why we can know the future, provided you can perceive without your ego blocking, and also go into the past, which also still is. That is also why I could have disappeared into that scene in the canteen, and also why time travel is a reality, just not in our physical perception. At one point, we will learn how to do these things also physically. That is probably part of the technology behind extraterrestrial beings visiting the Earth. And by the way, the Russians have said the same for a long time, that there is a substantial abstract and subjective component to UAP or UFO sightings. I interviewed some Russian people for a radio documentary about it some decades ago. So, to recap a little, the mental pattern that the universe emerges from is created simply by the notions of space, time, and motion, as described in chapter 15.6 in my book. It is what physics call the quantum fluctuations, the zero-point field, or the quantum field, with 10 to the power of 120 frenetic movements per second per square centimeter in the entire universe. It's extreme. Please note that nothing is actually moving. It is a static pattern interpreted and experienced as being in motion. The pattern must be experienced in full. From that first point on, the tiny mad idea, the experiencer starts experiencing all sorts of things seemingly animating out of it. The universal experiencer fantasizes, dreams. It senses the atoms, molecules, rocks, oceans, etc. That must feel the same as when you perceive these things. But God's perspective is everywhere and all time, while yours is from within the dissociation that is you. God knows it all, and everything is in focus simultaneously. Every idea in God/the Spirit/the experiencer can and must be focused on and understood. Not knowing is impossible. The need to know itself, that's the fundamental engine of the universe, even before the engine of change, that which we call energy. As the idea of the universe emerged with unlimited speed in full detail, it had also to be examined and experienced in its entirety, with materiality and other relevant qualia. That is what focus is, a mental examination, an imagining, creating a vivid image in your mind. If you are a particle or a rock, the experience is quite simple. Neither develops further to a mentionable degree. They are what they are, mostly. But for complex systems, it's more fun and more to be examined. The universal spirit came up, again through idealistic emergence, with the notion of a complex human being. Have you ever looked into a cell or the detailed structure of a brain? It's incredibly complicated, and everything is in motion. It's a vast, complex, dynamic system. And it must all be experienced as the integrated, overall, highest emergent idea of what the sum of the parts constitute. That's how emergence works. We don't see the already known features, we see the final result, the 3 in 1 + 1 = 3. So suppose the experiencer focuses on a human being. There are so many things going on, particularly in the brain, that the focus stays fixed until the changes come to an end or are reduced to a much lower level. That is until you die, which again is reach the idea of death. And then all processes eventually stop. That continuous fixation of focus is what is called dissociation. When you are in dreamless sleep, the same probably happens. There are not enough changes while you sleep to keep focus fixed on your experience, so it retracts to the collective domain. When the metabolism and brain activity arises again, your focus returns to the idea of you as a body. I realize I need to go deeper into all this, but the conclusion might actually be that dissociation occurs anew every morning. Okay, where are we now in the bigger picture? You are a part of the experiencer's, or God's if you like, consciousness. One of a myriad of focus points. There is one focus point for every single idea in the universe, small or large. That which is called a monad, I believe. The monad experiencing itself as the whole you, with all the knowledge you have acquired through many lifetimes, has started experiencing, manifesting this newborn baby. The experiencer first focused on the zygote, which was something completely new. It developed into a heart, brain and body. the first 3 years, you saw the world around you and yourself, your arms, legs, hands, and so on. But you had not yet dissociated. You were, in reality, God materialized. We should look at children differently. It's fair to assume that everything else in the universe assesses itself just like that. A rock perceives its inner, which is a lot of rock molecules, and its surroundings, which is mostly air and water molecules. But it has no brain or other mechanism to expand on these experiences. It doesn't dissociate and start saying to itself that I'm a rock. It simply experiences being it, just like the baby. The brain makes all the difference. It creates notion upon notion, branching out, fragmenting, fluctuating, and condensing into higher level notions, constantly in an insanely complex interplay with itself and the world. The latter, the perceived world, is the result of the processes in the brain. The brain is a machine that takes knowledge partly from the universal source and partly from the ego and expands it into further details through inner idealistic emergence. We are walking around in a mixed reality. Most of what we see is a manifestation or a realistic imagining of the collective knowledge. These are the trees, flowers, rocks and birds, people around us, the sky above and the stars in the nightly sky, our environment. On top of that, the ego adds its own wild, speculative interpretations and experiences. Here comes something important. The self-constructed inner notions of the brain are not always in congruence with the notions in the collective domain. Naturally, I would say, since the internal notions are inner and created inside a single organism, with hardly any sensible knowledge available. Most of what the ego knows comes from conditioning and whatever we tell and do to keep people under control in our so-called highly developed society. Still, these notions and experiences from the ego are known at the collective level, since the experiencer is one. Because of that oneness, it is impossible that the experiencer has diverging notions about the same thing. An electron is always an electron. A horse is usually always a horse. It has to be consistent. The notions from the ego and the notions in the collective realm of knowledge must merge somehow. It goes like this. If you and your brain walk over to that big scary animal standing there on the field in the dusk, and you suddenly start thinking it's not a horse, but a unicorn, because you believe something is sticking out from its forehead, then consensus must be negotiated. Your ego believes it's a unicorn, but the universal experiencer has also knowledge from many other sources. The birds, foxes in the nearby woods, butterflies and fleas, they all see a horse without any spear growing out of the forehead. The combined experiences and knowledge from all things in the universe are also instantly available in the collective domain. It swirls and mixes through the laws of complexity dynamics so that the most vital, most credible notions win. They become more or less robust attractors, as they are called. That's the purpose of it all. Notions and ideas develop abstractly and must also be experienced fully as qualia. These qualia experiences then give the universal experiencer expanded knowledge of what things are, what itself is in total. That expanded knowledge, in turn, constitutes the raw material for new emergent notions. In the book, I call this the circle of perception. The mechanisms of complexity, the concept of attractors, and the terms I use, like the pattern, the source, the collective, etc., and that which I call the experiencer, are also explained in the book available on my website. It ends one day, and it never ends. Both. The experience of the universe ends the day all things, particles, horses, whatever, are so far away from all other things that they cannot be perceived as something new together, an emergent unknown. 3. The abstraction of the new thing is conceived of, all right, but the experiencing is no longer possible since the things are too far apart in the material perception, given that the universe expands with increasing speed. At the end of time, the egos have nothing more to report through the Holy Spirit back to the collective domain. Consequently, experiencing the abstract pattern behind everything comes to a halt, and it all becomes static, a memory, and nothing more. But that memory may be experienced anew, all parts of it, over and over again, simply by focusing, each time with slight variations produced by the dissociated egos it holds. The universe ends up as a fixed structure with myriads of tiny sparks every time new insight arises within the larger structure, much like the glimmering lights at an amusement park. Slowly, slowly, they will eventually fade too. That is of no importance. The memory of the universe, the knowledge, is still there and can be relived forever. The world you and I experience is most likely such a revival. That also opens up what science calls a multiverse, but that's another story. You might think the theory I have presented is crazy. It's even more crazy, I can tell you. The principle of idealistic emergence in combination with complexity dynamics explain everything else in this universe as well. For example, how the fundamental entities and phenomena in physics came to be, and what they are in essence. All abstract phenomena, for example mathematics, music, language, ethics and aesthetics. And all subjective and psychological phenomena, like group dynamics, mental illness, the development of society, war and much more. With that knowledge, it's also easy to see what must be done to save our planet and ourselves from destruction. So, in short, the principle of idealistic emergence in combination with some basic laws of complexity dynamics explain it all. I shall present it to you in bits and pieces in coming videos. So this video was lengthy and complicated, I know. What I'm trying to convey is not grasped easily. But now you have an idea, a blurred picture as it might be. The book will provide more understanding, and I'm ready to answer any question you might have. Thank you for watching, and subscribe to my channel to get noticed when new material is available.